Okay, we will get to our first question. Well, actually, the first thing is Bill Collins just wanted to let you know, thank you for running, and thank you everyone for supporting John. He's wishing you good luck. The first question is from Margaret McAuliffe. Do you have a plan to address the racism that occurs on campuses? Do you have any courses in mind, discussion groups? She has a suggestion for maybe holding an event called Undoing Racism, but she would really like to know what your plan is to address the racism.
That's a great question. In fact, I participated in a conversation. The Board of Trustees had a great conversation at their last board meeting, which opened up the issue, and it was a really excellent point of discussion to put ideas on the table for, well, first to become aware of the inherent racism that exists in our society, and then to talk about how the community colleges can deal with it. It actually led to a program or a body of study that's very similar to what Ms. McAuliffe is proposing. And in fact, a group of the administrators and researchers, or I should say faculty, at the community college have done exactly this. I participated in the first of what will be a series of workshops and discussions on how to understand the problem and then how to try and deal with it, not just on the community college campus, but also more generally in society. So I think it's going to take time, but I think that our society has now become more open to the uncomfortable conversations that need to occur and are starting to occur. And I intend to be a part of it. I don't have a specific program for it, but I think we're all engaged in trying to address the issue in an honest way.
The next question is from David Wood. He wanted to know, in your role as a trustee, how do you envision your role in relation to the 3 labor unions that represent employees?
Well, part of the job of the trustees is to take into account the interests of all the stakeholders in the community college itself. And the 3 big unions, the teachers union, the certified employees union, and the AFSCME, the maintenance and service folks that keep the facilities running, are all very engaged in the process. They're all at various stages of negotiating or closing their contracts. Actually, only one contract remains open. But I think the main job of the trustee is to understand and be open to understanding and listening to the concerns of those bargaining units, and then to hammer out fair contracts that recognize the value that's created by those organizations, but also the responsibilities that we have to the taxpayers to be good stewards of the public funds that go to run the school district. So, you know, I think there are some who believe that, you know, labor unions need to be fought against. That's not my approach. But I also don't believe that it's the trustees' responsibility to do everything necessary to make sure the labor unions are happy. I'd like to work with them, understand their issues, make sure that their compensation and work rules are fair, and make it a good place, make our community college district a good place to work.
The next question is from Lance Cotton, and it's specifically on barriers to accessibility. He's mentioning specifically the high cost of textbooks, which could be as much as $500 for a single class. How can we work to reduce these barriers to access?
That's a great question. In fact, one of the things that I mentioned, and Larry Moody mentioned it as well, is the Promise Scholars Program. So for students that demonstrate a financial need, there are resources that they can tap into to address those ancillary items that are necessary for going to college. We also had a pretty interesting phenomenon that, you know, COVID hasn't been fun for anybody, but it especially has been challenging for the faculty at the community colleges, who literally in a matter of a week or two had to digitize their entire curricula. The outcome of that means that we now have a largely digital-based set of learning materials that can be accessed online. So yes, the Promise Scholars Program can help with books, can help with tuition, can help with food, transportation, even rent, and buying personal digital, personal technology, laptop or Chromebook or whatever to get online. And I think that's really the key, is applying, identifying where those needs are and which students are having difficulty, where those become barriers to entry for them to participate, and getting them the resources. Our community college, it literally has an almost $500 million budget, and we can afford to make sure everybody has books and computers.
And then we have a question, more personal question. Why are you choosing to do this at your stage of your career or life? That's from Jeremy Kelly.
Well, that's obviously a very personal question, but a great one. I had always been involved with public service early in my life. As Josh described my career in Sacramento, I worked in our state government for several years at the beginning of my career. And I've spent the last 18, 20 years working in the private sector and enjoying it greatly. I'm now at a stage in life where I have the flexibility and time and resources to be able to give back to my community. And when I thought about where and how I wanted to do that, I really think that the community colleges are the greatest point of leverage to have the biggest impact. So that analysis is really what brought me back to the community colleges, and my own personal passion for the role that the community colleges played for me in my development. There's no possible way I would have accomplished what I've accomplished without my community colleges, and it's time for me to pay it back.
And we have a question from one of our panelists, actually. Larry is wondering, would you consider opening satellite classrooms in East Palo Alto, Fair Oaks?
I think that is a really good idea, and here's why. When we were talking about vocational education, the community colleges offer an extremely low-cost way to get the exact same training that is offered by a lot of for-profit post-secondary vocational training organizations. Those private organizations charge a lot more, and they usually are very good at making sure the students take on federally guaranteed debt. As a result, a lot of students end up burdened with these heavy debt loads. But one of the reasons why these private schools have been so effective is they take the educational model to where the student is. They deliver the service in a way that's convenient. Instead of making the student, come up the hill and go to a 17-week academic semester and park on campus and so forth, they put their private training schools, training classes, down by the freeway in a place that commuters can easily access, and they deliver some of the content online in a combination of online and in-class learning. They meet the student where the student is, and I think what Larry is suggesting is right on target. It's hard sometimes to get across town and up the hill. Let's go put satellite campuses in the neighborhood where the students are to be served. I love it.
All right, and if we have any more questions, feel free to send them in. Once again, we thank you for joining us today. We're going to do one more plug of the website, johnpimentel.com. Be sure to go and check that out. Read John's plan for what he hopes to accomplish as a Board of Trustee member. Again, follow us on social media. And looks like that is it. We have received all of the questions. Lots of
Richard, I see one other question that just came in
yes.
Regarding the district itself and some elements of the campaign. I'm happy to talk about that if you like.
Right.
So the San Mateo County Community College District used to be an at-large district where all members were elected countywide. Over the last couple cycles, they've moved to a district-based election. And this is the last election that will complete that transition. So the seat that I'm running for is called District 5, and that is includes the communities of the east half of Menlo Park, going all the way to the Bay, including East Palo Alto and the Bellhaven communities. Then almost all of Redwood City and Redwood Shores, and then the area that's in between those three towns that is actually county territory called North Fair Oaks. The community is referred to as North Fair Oaks. So that's the footprint. John also asked whether or not there were other candidates. My understanding is there is one other candidate who has expressed an interest in being in the race. The formal filing process starts in the middle of July and ends in early August, and so we'll know if there are other candidates by the first week of August, I reckon. But my understanding is there is one other candidate running.
And we have another question from Margaret McAuliffe. She says that many kids are homeless, which creates a huge barrier. Any thoughts about dorms for low income or homeless, or how can we best assist them?
It's really interesting. You wouldn't think of it, but there is an incredible phenomenon of homelessness in community college students. In fact, Richard, you might be familiar with the statistic, but when I heard it, I was shocked. It was over 20, maybe even 30% of the students in the community college system in California are homeless or transitional in that they're couch surfing or otherwise in an unstable living situation. And of course, it's difficult to make a course of study happen when you're in that kind of a condition. So it's interesting. The part of the community college district has talked about and does have some housing right now that's mostly workforce housing. They've talked about doing some student housing. And in the past, the concept was to build that student housing for international students. I think that would be the wrong direction. I actually think if we do housing, and I think we can and should contribute to the overall housing supply paucity that exists in the peninsula, we could be part of the solution by using some portion of our campuses to build student housing for exactly those students that need it and who have a lot of the other same challenges, getting across town, having a vehicle, getting up the hill. If we could use some of our very precious and beautiful real estate for housing opportunities, I think it would be great in terms of improving access and eliminating a lot of those barriers that exist.
All right, and I'm scrolling through and it looks like we have answered all of the questions. Do any of the panelists have any questions for John, or? We're good. Okay. Well, I will hand it over to John to give like a closing remark. Appreciate everyone tuning in.
I'll again just say thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I intended for this only to take about 25 minutes. The question and answers were fun. Thank you. I'd be happy to follow up with anybody on email or phone call. Give me a shout. I really appreciate your consideration of my candidacy, and I hope to be able to serve our community on the Board of Trustees for the Community College District. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. This concludes the program.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Tony. Thank you, Josh. Thanks a lot, Richard.
All right. Thanks,
for moderating. That was great.